Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. I am the almighty Zentaco, and today we're going to be learning how to make turret objects point to a nearest target object. So this is really good for like tower defense games or, whatever. There's all kinds of uses for this. So in my example here, we have 3 turrets. We're using fingers. Now we can click to create an object and they will all point to the nearest one. But they do their calculations relative to themselves, so they can each have a different target. See, this object is closest to those 2. Now they each have a closest object. Now that one's closest. Now this one's closest. And we can delete them and they will readjust. So this is super handy. And we're going to get down to it and try to figure out how this works. But before we get started, this episode is brought to you by Bragg Organic Raw Unfiltered Apple Cider Vinegar with the mother. I don't know what that means. This is unpasteurized, it's naturally gluten-free, and it's a entire 32 fluid ounces, so this is really worth the money. It tastes terrible and can rot your teeth because it's very acidic, but apparently it's good for you. You're going to need to wash your mouth out with a base after this, or you will probably lose your teeth. I'm just kidding, I'm screwing with you guys. I don't have sponsors, but I am willing to plug your product if you pay me. I have no shame. Alright, all that aside, as a joke, maybe. I don't know. I might plug your product if you got something I actually am interested in advertising. Okay, let's get down to it. All right, so first we're going to need 2 objects. So go ahead and insert them now. 1 active and 2 actives. So the first one is going to be our target object. So go ahead and name it as such, target. And the second one is going to be the turret. That's what we're going to call it. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and import a background and some art, and then I will fade to that. So 1 second. Okay, so we are back and we have set up our scene. Now here is our target object. We do not need to create this at start, so you need to click on the runtime options and uncheck here where it says create at start. We don't need to do that because we're going to be creating this through the code. Now this is the turret. This does need to be created at start. We're going to go ahead and copy this though. We're going to need 3 of them just to show off how they can point to separate objects. So on these, you want to make sure that the initial direction is them pointing to the right. That is because that is the 0 angle, and if they're not pointing that way initially, then you're going to have some issues whenever you set up their angle. All right, so this should be all we need. Let's go ahead and click on the event list editor and let's get down to it. Insert a new comment and we're gonna say create and destroy the target object. And you can do this any way you want, but for this tutorial, we're gonna do this on a mouse click. So we're gonna say the mouse user clicks, it's gonna be a left click. So then we're going to create an object, which is going to be the target. And we can create this anywhere because we're going to set its position to the X and Y of the mouse. Now we're going to do that. So click on the target object, go to position, set X coordinate to. I hate how these all resize. I have a huge screen, so I normally play on 4K, but I have to shrink it down for my videos, and then everything gets jumbled up and the sizes are all wrong. Anyway, so type in X mouse. That'll give you the X position of your mouse. And then we need to set the Y position to the Y mouse. My nose itches. All right. Now make sure that the create is first. Yeah, that's all we need. Now we want to be able to destroy it. We're going to do that on a right click on the object. So go to the mouse, and then we want to say user clicks on an object, and that's going to be a single right button. And that's going to be on the target, and then we're going to destroy him. Destroy him! Okie doke. Now we're going to point to the nearest. So this is going to involve some loops. We're going to be doing a for each loop, and we're going to do 2 of them. It's going to be 1 for each on the turret and another for each on the target. I'll do my best to explain why this is the case. They're a little complicated, loops are at first, so I recommend watching my loop tutorial if you don't know anything about them. But they're great because they allow you to essentially very accurately scope the objects you are trying to deal with. So let's go ahead and set up a comment here, and we're gonna say target nearest. Okie doke. So first we want to set up a loop for the turret. So click on the turret, go to loops on each object. So this is going to create this loop. It's going to run it once for each one of these turrets. So we have 3, it's going to run it 3 times. And each time it runs it, it is going to scope the turret that it is currently looping with. So this is why it's great. It keeps you from having any mistakes on which object is being currently referenced, which can happen if you just willy-nilly like use always events and stuff. Sometimes Fusion gets confused and everything just seems to blow up. So the best way to fix that is a for each loop. It'll make sure your object is properly scoped. So we're going to call this acquire underscore target. And what are we going to do on this loop? Well, I actually made a mistake. We need to give some alterable values to the turret. So let's give it 3 values. We're gonna need a nearest. Now we'll call it closest distance. So this is going to be where we store the distance of the closest object. Then we're going to need the current target distance. And then we're going to need the target ID. So here is going to be the way in which we're going to do this essentially. So we're going to run these loops, and then first thing we're going to do is we're going to point to one. We're going to target one of these objects, okay? And we're going to store inside of our turret a value that has the ID of the nearest object to us and the distance of that object. So we're going to loop through each of these and compare the closest with the current. And if the current is closest, then we're going to update that ID and update that distance. So we can check through each one in sequence and thereby get whichever one is closest to us. Now, when we start this loop, we're going to have to nullify that by plugging in the closest value as a really, really large number. Otherwise, you will never be able to retarget something further away if the objects move. This keeps it, dynamic. So let's do that now. I hope that made sense. Alterable value, set closest distance, and just make it some arbitrarily huge number, like a bunch of 9s. All right, so that's what we're going to do first. We're going to essentially clear that value so that we can reuse it. And then we're going to start another loop, but this is going to be on the targets, and we're doing this so that we can properly scope the target. So go to count for each object, and we're going to call this point to target. Okay, now you see how Fusion decided to change the order of these? Can't let that happen. We need to clear it first, so make sure set closest distance is first. Fusion likes to be a butt sometimes. Okay, so now we need to do something on that loop. So go to the target, and the name of that loop was point underscore to underscore target. Is that right? That is right. Boom. So what are we going to do now? Well, so what we're going to do, we have essentially, we have scoped one of the turrets. So one of the turrets is currently active. And now we are running through each one of these potential targets in increment. So it's just going to pick one and we're going to go with it. So it's going to do this as many times as there are targets. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, go to the finger, go to alterable values. We need to update. So go to set. We need to update the value of current target distance. So we're going to get the distance between the finger and the currently scoped target object. And we do that this way. We're going to make this value be the distance between these two objects. And we can do that by clicking on the turret, go to position and select distance with a point. So here in the X and the Y, we're going to fill this in with the X and Y position of our target. So go to the target, say position, and select the X coordinate. And for the Y, do the same. Just highlight it, select this here, go to position, Y coordinate. So now we have plugged in that value. And all these are properly scoped because we are using these for each loops. Okay, so we're going to do another loop. It's the same loop, but we need to do this on a different event because we're going to add some conditions to it. So the name of that loop is point to target. So we still have the same target scoped. Now we want to find out if the value of, I have to resize all these. Come on now, this is annoying. If the value of current target distance is lower than the value of closest distance. So the closest distance is the value we saved for whichever object was closest. It's starting out arbitrarily high. So if this first object is, closer than 9,999, I think that's what I said, or 99,000, then it's going to plug this value in. It's going to update the closest distance value. Okay. Now this is going to absolutely be the case initially, unless you're creating an object way far away. Again, Fusion changed the order because it's a punk. So make sure that we are calling the loop before we check the condition. So if this is the case, if the current distance is lower than the closest distance, we want to do this. We want to set the closest distance to the value of current distance. So we've now updated it. And we also want to grab the ID of that target object. So go to, again, and we're plugging this into the turret. So we have the target ID, and we're going to click on the target, and we're going to grab its fixed value. So click on retrieved fixed value. A fixed value is a number, a unique ID for every single object in your game. So that tells Fusion to point to that specific object. Boom. So we've updated it. So now let's say we run through this, 100 times, and there is never an object closer, then we're going to only have this current ID plugged in. If another object is closer, it'll refresh this ID, and it'll give us, it'll replace it with that ID instead. So that is how we're going to essentially pick which object to point to. Okay, so we're done there. Now we need to go back to our finger loop, which was loop on each object, and what did I call that? That was acquire_target. And on this loop, we're going to point to the proper object. So we need another condition to do that, though. We want to find out if the target's fixed value. So go to compare fixed value. See, these all things, everything resizes, everything moves. Ugh. All right, so if the fixed value is equal to the value of target ID, so if the fixed value of this equals the target value, so this is properly scoping this object, then all we're going to do is point to it. So we do that this way. We're going to set the angle of this object of the turret object to go in the turret and select position angle of a vector. So what angle of a vector does is gives you an angle of a vector being, in this case, a coordinate, an x and a y. A vector is just a variable that has more than one number. So an x, y, a z. You can have a vector 2, a vector 3. I don't know how high it goes. I think it might just go to 3. I don't know. It's typically used for coordinates because, a vector 2 can give you an xy coordinate for a flat plane. A vector 3 would give you, cubic space you could move around within. Anyway, sorry, that was a tangent. So we're going to get the angle of the x position of our target object. So just grab its x coordinate, and then over here, grab its y coordinate. Boom. We're going to do 1 for maximum quality. Now, the reason we checked the fixed value of this object against the target value, if you don't do that, Fusion a lot of times, it's not going to know which object to point to, so it's just going to point to an object. Usually that's the last object that it's cycled through. This makes sure that it's matched up. So, we plugged in the nearest value to the turret, and then we're checking to see if this object shares that value. If that is confusing and you don't understand scoping, I do have a tutorial video on that, and you should watch it. Now, assuming I didn't royally screw something up, this is going to work. So let's take a look at it. Okay. I royally screwed something up. What did I do? Okay, yeah, I did do something wrong, something really obvious. I don't know why I didn't do this. Nothing is happening because we're actually not starting any loops. You see here, line 5? It says on each one of these loops, loop name acquire target, do this thing. We never ran the loop. So go ahead and insert a new line here. I don't know why I did that. We're going to make it an always event. We want to always call the acquire target loop. So that we'll do that this way. Click on the turret. Go to count for each object, and that is acquire underscore target. And so this should now work unless I did something else stupid. I don't think I did. Let's find out. All right. Looks like it works. So they're all pointing exactly to whichever target is closest to them in particular. So there you go, guys. Sorry about that little bit of error I made there. You know, I've been doing this for years and I still make mistakes. So, you know, it's just the way it is. I hope you guys found this video educational. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I'll try to get back to you as always. But the best place for you is my Discord channel. Lots of people there are willing to help you out. So I recommend you go take a look at that. Link will be in the description as always, as well as a link to the source file for this MFA. Thanks guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.